The risk of material misstatement is something that comes up in the auditing standards, but then also, of course, because we're auditing and we're using the auditing standards, we need to understand where the auditing standards actually fit into probe. And of course, how does that actually work in terms of the little buttons that we're pressing in probe. So I started off by just creating a little slide for you that shows you the parts that make up the determination of risk of material misstatement. So in other words, the little bits that you are completing in probe that ultimately gives you that answer, if I can put it that way, of risk of material misstatement. So on the left-hand side, at the bottom, you will see materiality calculation. Now, I've indicated there 1060 because that's where you start with the calculation of materiality, but it flows through a bit further. I'll explain as we go along. So first of all, the materiality of the account that I'm looking at will determine or will participate or contribute towards the determination of the risk of material misstatement. Then just above that, you can see the inherent risk at financial statement level, which is calculated in 1120, the control risk or control environment risk in 1130, fraud risk in 1140, and then only do we get to the assertion level. So once we get to the assertion level risk, that is where we then have all of these bits come together to give us an answer. Okay, so it's not just the assertion level risks, but all of these other matters as well. On the right-hand side of this specific slide, I've given you the 7 words which we've allocated or put into probe to give you an indication as to how high or how low is this risk of material misstatement. The names would probably look familiar to you, and I'll also show you as to where they link into the desired audit risk just now. But just to have a look at that, we've got 7 words there, starting with maximum, which is the biggest you could get, and then of course minimum, the lowest you could get. All right, so I've determined my materiality, determined my overall risks, and I've determined my assertion level risks. Now let's just go and see exactly where that fits into the actual documents. Right, so this is then the screenshot from 11.60 where I'm looking at my assertion level risks. You can see there where I've put those little blue dots there. I determine my inherent risk assessment at assertion level as well as my fraud risk assessment. So even though the previous slide only showed assertion level risk, there's another 2 little bits that come to that. Also, you will see there that the specific materiality is the other part that becomes important. Remember, we determine overall materiality, we determine the performance materiality, and then we also determine the specific materiality for each account balance. Okay, so specific materiality for that specific account. So we don't run back to overall materiality, but we specifically look for specific materiality. Right, so those 3 parts, and then when I look at 11.10, which is the summary of the risk analysis, that brings it all together very nicely. This specific screenshot comes from the print preview. So there I can clearly see the inherent risk assessment at financial statement level. In this specific screenshot, it's low. The control risk at financial statement level, of course, coming from 11.30, also being low. Fraud risk assessment at financial statement level, 11.40, also being low, so those 3 then. Then I go to the assertion level ones, again, assertion level, inherent risk at assertion level, fraud risk at assertion level, those 2, and then of course remember the materiality for the specific account, so specific materiality. Those 6 things, it's quite a number of things, those 6 things then ultimately get to the answer that we get in 11.10 being the risk of material misstatement. So if you look at the low, it doesn't necessarily make sense to get, hang on, low plus low does not make medium. But you've got to bear in mind that there are 6 factors. And then on this specific slide, I also indicated to you there that it's the materiality of the specific account. Okay. One very important thing is the methodology that we have implemented here to say that the moment that an account balance is bigger than the specific materiality, that account will have a risk of material misstatement of at least medium. And that's exactly why I'm showing you this one for property, plant, and equipment. Your balance for property, plant, and equipment is likely to be rather big, 500,000 Rand, 2 million Rand, whatever, a rather big amount compared to, of course, the materiality account value that you're going to have for that specific account. So let's say I started off with an overall materiality of 100,000 Rand, like we can see on the screen. Performance materiality is 80,000. I've got fixed assets, property, plant and equipment to a total value of 500,000 Rand for argument's sake. And so then when I get back to the part where I see how does the 500,000 Rand compare to my specific materiality of 80,000 or 50,000 or whatever it is, well, obviously it's material. So the moment that I've got an account that is material compared to the materiality, at that point in time, the risk of material misstatement will at least be medium. It can never be less than that. Okay, so that means because I've got a material balance or account that is material, I have to go and do lots of work to address that risk. Right, if we then move on, just a little screen maybe to make it a bit more visual for you. On the left-hand side of the slide, then I've got your risk of material misstatement, which we've determined through those 6 bits, the assertion level risks and the overall level risks, as well as the materiality. I then have somewhere in this part. Now, with the slide we looked at just now, I'll have a medium for argument's sake. And then, of course, I need to work towards something. And what's that going to be? Well, it's going to be my desired audit risk, which is, of course, the acceptably low level of risk that we are happy to accept when we sign off the audit report. Okay, so that's my end goal. Right, so you can see here very clearly, because I've had in the previous slide a medium risk of material misstatement, maybe I had a high or very high, I have some distance to travel downwards towards the low, very low, or minimum desired audit risk that I may have. Okay, so I determined the risk of material misstatement in 11.10, which is where we had all those matters come together with the little blue dots. And I then have to now go and, first of all, plan my response to these risks that I've identified, and that's exactly what the audit standards say. And that I will do, of course, through my audit plan. Now we start off then. Sorry, I'm just waiting a second or two because I'm changing slides just to get the data to go through. We start off then by almost a predetermined plan by the time we get to risk of material misstatement, because we have already determined that we are going to do control tests or that we're not going to do control tests, and that we're going to address significant risks if we have significant risks. If we don't, then we won't have significant risk responses. Of course, in Probe MMX, we always have our required procedures, so that's already a way of addressing that risk of material misstatement. What I then do is say, right, where's my desired audit risk? Have I already come down sufficiently to meet that point? Yes or no? And then, of course, if not, then I can go and choose to do more work, extended analytical sampling, etc., etc. Okay, so that's the whole picture of Probe MMX. But where does that fit into the software again? Now, the big thing is really, after I've done my planning, the next thing is really the audit program. Okay, so I'm going to show this then to you. How do we actually document that we have sufficiently addressed our risk of material misstatement in the audit program? Okay, and this is where it all comes together. Please just remember, I put it rather small on the slide, but at the bottom I say professional judgment is used. You cannot just rely on the software to give you a summative or a mathematical answer. You have to get to the judgment that you've done. You've planned this, you've assessed the risks, you've addressed the risks through audit procedures, and now we get to this part on the conclusion of your audit program where you've got to indicate this. All right, so starting just underneath the blue heading, risk of material misstatement, I have the assessed risk of material misstatement, which is medium, medium, medium. That's where we started off. When we did our planning, we saw we had a medium risk of material misstatement. I then have the assurance obtained. Now, in this specific case, we only had required procedures. If I had done control tests or significant risk responses or sampling or whatever the case may have been, I would have had extra lines there where you can see the little arrow. There would have been more than one line. Okay, that's the first thing. Secondly, I would have these highs and lows and mediums and nothings come through from each of the specific audit programs. So at the bottom of the required procedures tab, I would have concluded on the required procedures to say I've got high assurance on completeness, high assurance on existence occurrence, low assurance on rights and obligations, and let's say for argument's sake, I had nothing, I haven't even done something to address valuation allocation. Probably not very likely, but just to show you the results now. Right, then I come to the conclusion tab, which is where we are now, and I will then come and decide on what is the estimated audit risk remaining. That's the one that I've circled there. Now, the answer, of course, is how do I complete that? And that I've put on the slide for you. How do I complete the estimated audit risk remaining? Well, firstly, I've got a tooltip, which I'll show to you just now. But remember, it's a gray block. It's an input cell. So please type it in there if you feel that you've sufficiently addressed it. What is the point, of course? You want to reach the desired audit risk. So I want the estimated audit risk remaining to be at least as low as the desired audit risk or lower. So there you can see with EO, I've got low, low. I've got satisfactory audit evidence, happiness. With completeness, I've got very low, which means maybe I've done a bit too much, or maybe, it's just the computer. So that is also sufficient. But with rights and obligation and valuation allocation, I cannot sign off yet because I haven't yet reached the desired audit risk. Okay, so that is really the point of what I'm trying to achieve at that point. How do I complete those gray blocks though? Well, you can type it in there, but we also have a tool tip there, which will tell you that from a computer side, without applying judgment, simply just looking at a 1 plus 1 or a 2 minus 1, what does the computer say would it ordinarily or mathematically have been the estimated audit risk remaining? Let's look at that. If you have completed your assurances obtained, you can just simply hover above that gray block while it's still empty, or even when it's not empty anymore. You hover above it and you get that little screen or message there to say probe estimate, please note estimate minimum. So because you started with a medium, you had high assurance test of controls, medium with required procedures, low with substantive sampling, so you've probably already achieved the minimum desired audit risk. How do I actually accept that? If I like it, double click it, and that's all good to go. Okay, if I don't like it, it's not the end of the world. I apply my professional judgment and I type in there what I want it to be. Okay, please just remember that because it's professional judgment, you have to also complete or document why you are assessing the estimated audit risk to be low, very low, or minimum, or medium, or whatever it may be. And for that, then I will get to the little risk. The reason button or the reason space on the left hand side just below conclusion. If you were to hover there, you would get a little message there to say document your reasons for the conclusion there. Okay, that's really risk of material misstatement in short. I'm sure I could keep you busy for the next day on this, but in short, that's really where it all comes together on the software.